Hey guys, what's going on this afternoon? Jacob, Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors TV. Well guys, I wanted to hop on and kind of do a video recapping the first couple of weeks here in Louisiana for the waterfowl season, guys, and kind of get your thoughts and give you my takes on what I've seen so far out there. So a lot of you right now are aggravated. A lot of guys are getting on social media. They're bitching, they're complaining, and they're wondering where the ducks are right now here in Louisiana. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit, first of all, about what I've experienced hunting public land over the last 2 weeks since the season's been open here. I can tell you that before the season opened, we put in quite a bit of time scouting, guys. And we were scouting local WMAs that we were interested in hunting. And several of them that we scouted had quite a bit of waterfowl that were holding to them. And really got me excited. I was really pumped up heading into the season. I was like, okay, I think even though it's been a lot of warm weather, we don't have, regular conditions like we'd have at this time of year with cooler temperatures, any of those big fronts hitting. I think it's still going to be a pretty good, start to the season. So we had our West Zone open up. And it looks like the first weekend of the West Zone, most people tend to do, they tend to have pretty good hunts that weekend, it looked like, especially in the southeast portion of the state. Your coastal marshes, those areas like that. Some of the guys on the west side of the state, you guys struggled if you were in southwest Louisiana. But there was a couple of factors that played into that, in my opinion. First of all, if you guys remember, we had that storm that was supposed to enter the Gulf of Mexico, possibly be a hurricane, a potential tropical storm, or a hurricane. That never came like they thought it might happen, which thank God that wasn't the situation. Nobody needs that, especially in November when we're in duck season, or any time of year for that matter. But what it did bring is it pushed a lot of water into the coastal marshes in those zones that we're talking about. So a lot of places that were holding birds, you had feed, and that's why those birds were holding to those particular areas. Well, what happened was that water shot up big time in these coastal marshes, and it submerged that vegetation that those birds were keying in on, and really buried it, and it made it hard for those birds to be able to get to it like they were doing previously before that water pushed in. So at that point, it started spreading out the birds, in my opinion. And what you saw was birds moving on to other areas to try to be able to find vegetation that they could key on a little bit easier. And also what it did was it dispersed the birds out to areas where that water came up at, to where they might have not been able to spread out previously, before that. So what I mean is it made the playing field a lot wider, a lot bigger for these birds to be able to utilize with water that they had available to them. So I think that kind of screwed a bunch of people up here in the state with that water coming in, especially if you hunt the coastal areas. So a week later, we had the East Zone open up, and I've heard some good reports in the East Zone, especially middle part of the state. There's some public land opportunities in the middle, central part of Louisiana that I've got some really good reports on. Guy had some birds. Guys did real well last weekend for opening weekend. But then all of a sudden, here we go again. It started tapering off. We had warm weather up until this little front hit, which now, as I film this, we're sitting here on Thursday afternoon. So we've had a cold front come through over the last day or so. But where are the birds at? Where are they going? Well, what I can tell you is not only did we have conditions that weren't in our favor with the high water that came in that we talked about, that's kind of stuck around for a little bit, but I can tell you the number one factor, just in my opinion, guys, and you may disagree with me, is a lot of these areas that were holding birds when I was scouting over the last couple of weeks right before the season opened up is pressure. And we talk about pressure all the time. We talk about how important it is to let areas rest, and that's something that you have the privilege of doing if you maybe are a private landowner or a leasee that's leasing some land. But those of us who are public land waterfowl hunters, you don't have that in your favor when it comes to pressure. Right now, since the season opened up, every day these areas in both the West now and the East Zone here in Louisiana is getting pressured with people hunting. And I don't know if it's just me, guys, but it sure seems like the openers this year, there has been way more hunters that are attacking public land this year than any time I've seen in the last couple of years. And that's saying something. I'm going to be honest with y'all. That's saying something, because I would never say that it's not pressured in Louisiana when it comes to public land. But there's something about this year that it is really, really concentrated with a lot of people that are visiting our WMAs. And look, in the grand scheme of things, I think it's great that a lot of people are getting out there. I think a lot of people are being exposed to the sport. And I think that that's a great thing. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to sound like I'm bitching, because I'm not bitching, first of all. I'm one of those guys. I'm a little bit older. I've done this for a long time. I've hunted public land my whole life, and I know how it goes. There's usually a big push at the beginning of the season, and then if things aren't good, it starts tapering off from there. And that may be the case that we find here in the next couple of weeks as we get ready to close out the first split in Louisiana. A lot of guys may get, kind of fed up that the hunting hasn't been great, but that's just the way it typically goes. And that's how, the history of what I've seen through the years, that's how it tends to play out. But as far as kicking off the season, there is a lot of pressure that has been on those birds. So there's areas that I know I scouted over the last couple of weeks, me and a couple of friends of mine that hunt together, and they had birds consistently. We went multiple, scouting trips. They had birds consistently sitting on property because they had, food source. They had, adequate, conditions, and it was good for them to be there. Well, once the pressure, unfolded with the, the opening of the west zone and then the east zone, we started noticing very quickly that those birds left the area. Now, as hunters, if you have the opportunity to be able to go out every day and hunt every day and stay on the birds, then you're probably killing birds somewhat consistently, because I do believe we had a good number of birds down here for the openers on both zones once we opened up. But if you're a weekend guy and you're working during the week and you can't stay with those birds, you don't have the opportunity to go out and scout those birds and stay kind of where they're moving to, then you're probably not having a whole lot of success when it comes time for the weekend, and you're going back to those spots that you hunted the previous weekend. And that's what I'm hearing a lot of guys talk about. They say, man, I just there's no birds. There is birds here. It may not be the numbers of birds that we want and that we hope for at the beginning of the season, but there's plenty of birds that were here when we opened up here in the last week or two to be able to say that we have enough birds down here right now to be successful. I think the key is being able to stay on them. Those of you guys, like I mentioned, who could, maybe you take vacation this time of year when it opens up and you have that opportunity to stay on the birds and kind of follow the patterns where they're going, you're probably the guys that are having success right now. Unfortunately, I'm not one of those guys. I'm working a normal job during the week, and then I'm hunting on the weekend. Now, I have some vacation coming up next week, so I'm hoping I can kind of get back on that pattern of staying on some birds again as we get ready to wrap up the first split of the season. But if you're not that guy, you're going to struggle right now, guys, because let's just talk about the overall migration this year. The overall migration is just behind. That's what's going on. Anybody who follows the migration, you know what's going on right now. You know that we're in a warm pattern this year, very, very warm across the flyways. Up until just a couple of weeks ago, actually up until last week, Canada was still holding quite a bit of birds. So your nesting grounds, your Dakotas, the prairie pothole regions, all those areas, we have guys that we talk to in those particular areas that are hunting those areas and telling us, hey, they still got tons of birds here. We don't have snow on the ground. Nothing's locked up the birds up here. There's still a ton of birds up here. So when that's happening and we're already, mid part of November, well then guess what? What we're seeing down here right now in Louisiana is what came here in that first push of the migration. But we're not getting those continuous pushes after that because the conditions just hasn't fared real well as far as locking up the northern portions of the flyways. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense there. The Dakotas, Canada, if they're not frozen over at this time of year, guys, up north, that high in the flyways, then typically you're not going to see a big push in the migration. Those birds just aren't going to have to leave, so they're not going to make it down here to where we are here in Louisiana and places like Arkansas and places like that in the lower portions of the flyway. That's my point I'm trying to make. Now, something you're going to see happen is the forecast for Canada is over the next 3 to 4 weeks, from what I saw, it's going to be locked up pretty good. They're going to have snow on the ground. They're going to have a lot of cold weather that's going to hit those areas, the Dakotas as well. You're going to start to see that migration pushing down. Another thing that I think could possibly help us here in Louisiana this weekend is you guys up in Arkansas. Arkansas is opening up their duck season this weekend. So a lot of those birds that are sitting in Arkansas right now, and once that pressure starts hitting them, just like it did here in Louisiana, you're going to probably see some of those birds shift up the flyway and some of those birds shift down the flyway, which would be us here in Louisiana. So I expect to see a couple of more, pushes of birds coming in over the weekend, this weekend. So if you have the opportunity, in my opinion, to hunt like maybe Monday, Tuesday of next week as we get ready to go into Thanksgiving, I think that'll probably be a good time to get out there and do some hunting, because you're going to have a lot of that pressure from Arkansas over the weekend, moving those birds around, moving them out, and pushing them to different areas. The only thing that I could say is not good, that looking forward, we had this cold front that hit this week, guys. As of today, we sit on Thursday, heading into the weekend this weekend. I can tell you, I talked to several guys that are good friends of mine that are reliable sources that hunted today, and they all said the same thing. They had pretty good hunts today. They had more birds show up. It looked like the birds were a little bit fresher. They were willing to work and decoy a little bit better. It was kind of like they had pushed some of those stale birds out of there. Some new birds came down with this low cold front, pushed down to us, and they had good hunts today. It looks like through the weekend, we're going to continue to have cold weather, but we're also going to have increased pressure on those birds. I noticed that on Fridays, and then of course Saturdays and Sundays is when the majority of the guys are going to get excited. If you're looking at heading out tomorrow on a Friday, and you're thinking, okay, it's Friday, we're not going to have a ton of pressure probably, then I can tell you, if you're hunting a piece of public land that is holding some birds or has held some birds in the last week or two, you can expect quite a bit of company tomorrow at the boat launch, if I had to guess as well on that. Reason being, guys are excited. They want to get out there. They've been struggling. They got a cold front. They've been working all week. So a lot of you boys probably going to call in to work tomorrow. You're going to go hunt. You're going to make a hunt. You might have already called in today on a Thursday. So that pressure is going to once again be put on those birds. So even though Arkansas, like I mentioned, is opening up this weekend, you're going to really have to get smart with your hunts next week if you're hunting the beginning of the week, because you're going to have not only the added pressure from hunters over the weekend here in Louisiana, but you're also going to have people hitting vacation next week with Thanksgiving. A lot of people are taking off, so you're probably going to have quite a bit of pressure again next week, guys. So what I think is going to happen is we're going to get a little influx, some good days to hunt here, probably over the next maybe 2 days, 3 days at the most. Then it's going to kind of start tapering off again. The weather pattern for next week is not looking favorable for us. It's going to warm up again. We're going to have another warming trend. So with that happening, it's going to be interesting to see if those birds stick around or if we get any kind of new birds coming in. That's just kind of my take on it, so far. And I could be completely wrong, guys. I'm not saying I'm right on this. This is just what I've seen and what I've observed and what my thinking is on this whole situation in Louisiana. In my opinion, once again, and I'm saying that a lot, in my opinion, because it is my opinion only, I think that the best days are to come. Historically, if you look at logs that or at least us, our group, logs that we've kept through the years, the first split in Louisiana is a lot of times your best split. As far as the first half of the season, that's when we have large numbers of birds migrating down. I was taught as a kid it was always the second split, but if you look at the numbers, that's typically not going to be the situation for a lot of us here in the state. That first half of the season is really when we try to get it. We try to get after it. We try to get those birds, and try to fill those bag limits if we can. As we head into the second split of this year, it may be a little different this year. With this migration being delayed and us not having that cold push of weather early on, those birds making it down the flyway as early as they typically do, I think this year we could see a better second split than we see in the first split this year, or the first half of the season. Let me say that. Once again, I could be wrong on that. I hope me personally, what I'd like to see is it's kind of staggered between both. I'd like to see a solid first half of the season, and I'd like to see a solid second half of the season. I really don't want it to be just, a blowout fantastic in one half and then nothing in the second half, or vice versa. I would personally like to see it kind of spread out to where it's consistent throughout the whole season if we could get some sort of consistency. But just to answer you guys' questions, there are birds in the state. There are birds that are here. They're just heavily pressured right now. That's what's going on, in my opinion, on public land specifically that we're talking about. So if you think pressure doesn't affect those birds and you don't pay attention to that and you're not having much success right now, then you really need to start paying attention to that if you're serious about this sport, you know, and you want to go out there and you know, kill more birds and you want to harvest more birds. Some guys, it doesn't really matter to them. They're there for the camaraderie. They're there for the you know, the experiences, and that's awesome, man. I think that's a great thing as well. But if you're one of those guys, you know, it's expensive sport to be a part of. If you're one of those guys that wants to see a little bit of return on your money and have some success, you know, in the field, then I definitely think our best days are to come here in the rest of the season, man. It's early on. My advice would be stay patient right now, guys. Stick at it. Stick with it. Stay at it, I should say. And keeping your nose to the grindstone on this. It's a struggle. If you're a public land hunter, it's a struggle always. Yeah, I know it's great. You see big straps on social media. Guys have good days. And you may see those pictures, you know. But what you don't see is those pictures or hear from those guys when they don't have good days. And they're typically not going to talk about those days. And that's perfectly fine as well. My point being is that there's more bad days than probably good days, especially on public land. And that's just the way it is. But that's what, in my opinion, makes public land so special, is when it all comes together, you get a good day, it really makes it worthwhile. It really makes it special, and it really makes it kind of gives you that feeling of accomplishment and like, hey, we really did something today. You know, we had a good hunt, and yeah, all the odds are against us, you know, as far as hunting on public land. We have to get up earlier. We have to get out there. We have to fight. You know, we have to build a blind. We have to do all this stuff that comes along with public land hunting. But when it does come together, and you guys will agree with me on that, it's really special, and it makes it worthwhile. So anyway, guys, I know I went a little longer on this video, but I wanted to kind of do a recap of the first 2 weeks of the season. Kind of give you my takes on what I thought I saw out there and what I'm seeing out there. You know, it's just one of those things, man. It's a great time of year for us. It's our favorite time of year as waterfowl guys. We get to get out there and enjoy it, man. So get out there and enjoy it. You know, get out there and enjoy it. It's not going to be a banger every hunt. You guys know that already. I don't have to tell you that. But stick at it. It's going to be some good days coming up. I guarantee y'all it's going to get better. Don't look to play the blame game. It's nobody's fault right now. Mother Nature's doing her thing. We're doing our thing as hunters, getting out there and hunting and putting pressure on the birds. And we just need to have Mother Nature help us out with the weather. Keep pushing some birds down to us. We'll start seeing a little bit less pressure as the season goes on, more than likely. And we'll have some good days out there, guys. Y'all let me know your thoughts down in the comments if you don't mind. I'd really like to get your thoughts on what you think and what you're seeing out there. If you hunted today, did you have a good hunt with this cold front that moved in? If you did, let me know. I'd love to know if you saw more birds today. I didn't get to hunt today, so I'd love to know if you saw more birds. So if you enjoyed the video, guys, we appreciate, give us a thumbs up. We'd appreciate that so much. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel here, we ask that you consider doing so. But until next time, my name is Jacob, and this is Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors TV. Y'all take care. Good luck this weekend, and y'all go get them, boys.